I'd like to open today with a sentimental snatch of song from I Dreamed a Dream, from my favourite musical Les Miserables, linked in the description. There was a time when men were kind, and their voices were soft, and their words inviting. There was a time when love was blind, and the world was a song, and the song was exciting. There was a time when it all went wrong. I dreamed a dream in time gone by, when hope was high and life worth living. I dreamed that love would never die, I dreamed that God would be forgiving. But the tigers come at night, with their voices soft as thunder, as they tear your hope apart, and they turn your dream to shame. I had a dream my life would be so different from this hell I'm living, so different now from what it seemed. Now life has killed the dream I dreamed. Although Fontaine was singing about lost love and the deterioration of her working class life as a young and abandoned mother in early 19th century France, the words ring true now, not so much for the salty underbelly of society, who, it can be credibly argued, having experienced a brief period of upward mobility in the last 150 years, have now lost all optimism and are largely content to subsist on KFC and Netflix, grinding away in the rent trap until cancer or heart disease carries them off. But to that great bastion of liberal democracy, and from whence most of my viewership derives, the middle class. Such words as I've just quoted from Les Miserables were once the lament of the downtrodden working class. They are now becoming the woeful siren song of the middle class also. By way of example, I'd like to share with you 2 receipts that I've come into possession of in the last couple of weeks. These 2 bills illustrate 2 facets of middle class life. One, the day-to-day, and another, the getaway. 2 extremes, but both of which tell the same sad and outrageous story. And it is in their complete congruity that I see the big picture upon which the title of this video is based. Here now is my most recent grocery bill. You may wish to peruse it in detail or simply take my word for it, but what you're looking at here is a very modest shop, so much so that I carried it a kilometre home on foot in just 2 paper bags, because we're not allowed to use sturdy plastic bags anymore, because we plebs must save the planet, while the elites jet off to Davos every January in carbon-belching private jets to concoct more ways for us, their minions, to tighten our belts. What you're looking at is about 4 menial dinners worth of food, 4 sparse lunches, plus some eggs, cheese and sundry snacks, as well as basic staples like toilet paper and rubbish bags. This small haul of groceries from a large chain supermarket, enough food for about a week's worth of very modest meals for just one, cost $102.54. I'm fortunate that I don't have dependent children to feed, a large mortgage and car to service, and that I earn a marginally respectable income, and yet this grocery bill still stings. Having been doing my own weekly shopping now for over 2 decades, I can tell you emphatically, without needing to provide evidence, for I'm sure your own recent experience in this regard necessitates none, that a mere 4 years ago, pre-COVID, this bill would have been up to 50% cheaper. Even if we take a more forgiving approach, and I'm well past the point of forgiveness when it comes to the technocrats who daily inflate our monetary supply, we could say that pre-COVID, this bill might have been about $70. That still represents over a 40% increase in the cost of groceries. I've been harping on this for 2 years now, and while I take no pleasure in it, I called this inflation thing well before anyone in my daily periphery could see it. I recall the sardonic and patronising smiles I received from colleagues and even some friends at the time. Oh, there goes JJ again, doom-mongering. Well, friends and associates, I was right. And here we are now, paying at least 30% more for food than we were in 2020. I claim no special intelligence or insight here, Many thousands of others saw exactly what I did coming down the pipeline, including scores of online influencers and bloggers, most of whom were swiftly cancelled, silenced and shadow banned for daring to question the wisdom of our great and all-knowing mandarins as they brazenly pulled the lever on the money printer and inflated the dollar supply by many tens of trillions, ostensibly to keep us safe from a virus with a 99.98% survival rate. And when the COVID sham ran thin, they devised a new reason to keep printing: Ukraine. And now it's Israel-Gaza. And what tomorrow? And what the day after? On and on and on it goes, as our money becomes less and less valuable, and the entire lunatic system totters closer and closer to the brink of complete collapse. Now this would all be fine if there was sufficient growth underpinning the inflation of the money supply, but there is not. In fact, it is the exact opposite. The money supply increases and growth slows. And small wonder. The suffocating restrictions and regulations of the net zero agenda render no other economic outcome possible. Some have called it a controlled demolition, others a managed decline. But if you'd really like to dive amongst the weeds on this issue, I recommend James Lindsay's excellent talk on degrowth, linked in the description. But what it all boils down to is stagnant wage growth for the working and middle classes and an ever-increasing cost of living. It's as simple as that. Not to lament my own situation, for although I am feeling the pinch, especially since taking on the full burden of rent for my apartment now that my ex and I are no longer sharing bills, and while I humbly acknowledge that there are many millions doing it way tougher than me in the West alone, I've not had a meaningful pay rise in the past 5 years, despite having risen in seniority in my organisation and taken on extra roles and responsibilities not outlined in my job description, during which time the rate of inflation has dwarfed my paltry pay increases by at least 50%. Probably much more, all told. Before I go on, I'd like to share with you the second aforementioned receipt. This one from a 5-star hotel in Australia's Gold Coast. This was sent to me by a friend last week who was staying at the Langham for a work conference and wanted a couple of beers and a grilled cheese sandwich brought to his room. As you can see, 2 Heinekens plus 2 bits of bread, a smattering of cheese, a couple of slivers of ham and a slice of tomato cost a grand total of $74. Again, we see the same obscene level of inflation. And while I cannot claim to be a jet-setter who has spent half his life in 4 or 5-star hotels, I have taken enough vacations and enough weekend getaways in my time to once again emphatically tell you that this bill 4 years ago would have been only about $40, almost 50% cheaper. You may be wondering why I'm bringing up luxury accommodation here, and what that has to do with the price of fish for the average Joe. I'll come to that, but first let me break down this absurd room service bill. $15 per beer for a total of $30. Pre-COVID, you'd probably be looking at $11 to $12, but it's the food and the mysterious tray charge that really blows my mind. $36 for a toasted sandwich, which, I am reliably informed, was basically inedible, so dry and measly were the ingredients, and furthermore, served by surly and unhelpful staff. And what of the tray charge? $8 for reasons, as the kids like to say. An entirely arbitrary and meaningless charge akin to the service fee that Uber Eats introduced a couple of years ago, and the 1 to 3% transaction fees that we must now pay on virtually every electronic purchase, which, by the way, we are forced to make because hardly any shop will accept cash now. It reminds me of the last 2 or 3 hotel stays I've experienced, where, unlike pre-COVID times, they now charge you for a bucket of ice. up to $15 per bucket in some cases. On my last real holiday in July last year, I resorted to trudging down from our suite at the Palazzo Versace in Gold Coast to the local bottle shop and lugging great bags of ice back up to the room to keep the drinks cool. Such was the obscene expense of ordering a bucket from the kitchen. At $5 a bag from the store, it was a no-brainer compared to the 200% markup and previously non-existent price tag that the hotel was charging. So why am I thundering away at the luxury hotel industry? Surely this is not in keeping with the somewhat humble and basic persona I've cultivated thus far. I'll tell you why. Because, my friends, a few nights at a 5-star hotel is not, or at least was not, a thing of luxury for most middle-class folk up until very recently. It was, in fact, if one were that way inclined, quite an affordable and indeed reasonable thing to do if you saved your pennies and fancied a few days away from home in pleasant and commodious surrounds. Yes, most of us saved the big holidays for places like Bali or perhaps Thailand, places you could go for 2 weeks or more on a budget of $5,000 or less. But for many of us in the middle stratum of society, the occasional getaway at a 5-star hotel was a treat we enjoyed from time to time. It allowed us to pretend, for the briefest of time, that the world was a song, and the song was exciting. You see, here's the thing about high-end hotels. They were not built for rich people. They were built for the middle class. Most rooms will cost you between $300 and $600 a night, a range that is affordable on a brief and infrequent basis for any single person or couple on a modest to good income. Yes, naturally these edifices house luxury penthouses and suites with plunge pools, grand vistas and multiple bedrooms also, where the real rich folk stay when they're in town. But these accommodations make up maybe only 2% of the hotel's capacity. Most rooms are there for the middle class, who come and go, either by way of vacation or business trip, and upon this clientele have these businesses survived for perhaps the past 100 years or more. But this is increasingly no longer the case. I vent spleen on this particular tangent as the little 3-night hotel mini-break was one of the very few things I still enjoyed about my middle-class life until very recently. And the room service bill I've just shared serves to remind me once more of the erosion of our standard of living, to say nothing of the day-to-day inflation we experience, and which hits us where it really hurts, in our fridges and pantries. I made the following prediction to the aforementioned friend, not that it takes any great prescience at this point, such has been the manifest deterioration of every service and hospitality industry these past 4 years. Hotels will become more expensive and less commodious for all but the super rich. Sandwiches will rise from $36 to $40, and from thence to $50. The tray charge will increase from $8 to $15, and then to $20. At some point they'll cut off room service to the lower order units altogether, and one will be required to go down to the one understaffed and barely functioning restaurant for meals, which one will then carry back up to one's room in Uber Eats style bags, while the great and good look down smirking from the exclusive mezzanine bar and eatery. Eventually the restaurants will disappear altogether, and one will actually need to order Uber Eats to the lobby if one is disinclined to dine out. Eventually, and indeed already, such places will become nothing more than stacks of fancy rooms sporting an ever-decreasing complimentary housekeeping service. My friend who is currently staying at the Langham tells me that the housekeeping now only comes once every 2 days. When did that happen? I'll remind you, this is the Gold Coast's preeminent hotel. He also tells me they have now closed their restaurant for everything but dinner, meaning lunch and breakfast are out. What the hell is going on here? You may yet be wondering why I'm so up in arms about the hotel issue. Don't get me wrong, I can live without this little luxury. My issue is that I see this as a warning sign and an omen of worse times to come. The first whisper of wind of a momentous storm, if you like. When grand and long-enduring businesses such as classy tourist hotels can no longer make ends meet, to the point where they are charging $15 for a bucket of frozen water, and charging an additional $8 for a bellboy to walk it up to your room, and discontinuing breakfast and lunch service, and scaling back their housekeeping to once every 2 days, it is a sign that the middle class is running out of money. Let me reiterate. Hotels like the Langham, the Sheraton, and even the Versace, whose Gold Coast location closed down in August last year, by the way, were not built for rich people. They were built for the middle class. The true rich, they don't need hotels. They don't even need luxury resorts. They have their own private islands. Eventually, the hotels will disappear altogether, as too will regular commercial air travel, the tourism industry itself, restaurants, cafes, and other middle-class attractions that have for so long sustained and distracted us from our daily toil and service to the machine. For as I've said before, the machine no longer needs us. That is to say, our happiness and comfort do not feature in their grand agenda. If you think I'm being dramatic, I urge you again to listen to James Lindsay's talk on degrowth and hear what the elites of Davos have in store for us. And if you still don't believe me, or think I'm prattling on like a brat, bitching and moaning about the state of the luxury hotel industry, then simply look at your grocery bill and tell me they're not waging a war on the middle class. Run the numbers and compare them to your real wage growth these past 4 years, and tell me that you did not once have a dream your life would be so different, and indeed, that modern life has not killed the dream you dreamed. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. Please also subscribe to my Substack at jjdawson.substack.com. And if you'd like to keep in touch, please do follow me on X at RealJJDawson. You can also follow me on Getter, Gab, and Minds. And of course, if you enjoyed this, please do give it a like and share it about, because it really helps me out.